Deirdre Bosa joins us now with a special guest. Hello, Deirdre.
Good morning. That's right. I'm joined by Jim Breyer of Breyer Capital. Thank you for being with us in Guangzhou.
Wonderful to be in the greater Bay Area.
In the greater Bay Area. We've been talking about it the last few days. Now, you've actually been to China about 7 times this year, so you know it well. What are you hearing on the ground when it comes to rising tensions and ahead of the G20 meeting this week?
I think there's real apprehension about what a deal might look like. And so I think that there are concerns. People are hopeful that some trade deal becomes important both from a product and intellectual property standpoint as well as the tariffs. But most of the people here and most of the people I talk to are more in the free trade camp. So there is concern.
It's interesting to be here at a tech conference because it feels like tech companies are being used as sort of a bargaining chip. What are you hearing from big tech in China versus the U.S.? Are you hearing similar things, similar concerns?
Well, I think big tech in the U.S. would like to see the China market more open, would like to see the ability for them to deliver products and compete with Tencent and Alibaba in particular. But it remains to be seen how quickly that will open.
Right. Let's talk about Apple in particular.
Absolutely.
Talking about bargaining chips, earlier this week, the president came out and said that there could be tariffs on iPhones and computers. Who does that ultimately hurt?
Well, my personal view, it hurts the consumer. Apple is truly an unbelievable company. We can argue about the pricing, but their supply chain here in China is the most advanced supply chain I've ever seen. And I've visited the supply chain several times. The products are terrific. They're priced too high, perhaps, but Apple is a U.S. treasure. And I think that for many of the companies that I would view as U.S. treasures, and I would put Walmart and others in that category, great U.S. companies, they would stand to be hurt dramatically by big tariffs.
Right, and we're talking, you mentioned some of them are now, some of the big tech companies are looking at how to get into China, and we've seen, Google take another look, Facebook take another look after, leaving this market before. Do things need to change? Is it profit or principle? Do they have to choose between the two? Is there always a compromise when you look to China?
I think there's always a compromise, and the question is what degree of compromise. Apple does a lot of business in China. We talked about Starbucks doing a lot of business in China. The tech companies have to figure out how to enter in an appropriate way. And these are radical times in terms of controversies that are created. Everything's a little louder, partly due to Facebook, Twitter, and social media companies. So I think they would like to see it open, and I believe at the highest levels for the U.S. companies, they would like to see the intellectual property protected a little bit more than has historically been the case.
Okay, speaking of Facebook and controversy, you know this company well. You are a Facebook board member for nearly a decade. What are your thoughts on what's going on right now? Has Zuckerberg mishandled the last year?
Oh, I don't think he's mishandled it, but I met Mark when he was 20. I invested when he was not yet 21. I've seen tremendous evolution, and we lived through the mobile strategy during the IPO and watching how he handled that. But the company itself has mishandled many of these topics over the last 12 months.
Is he
Again, as a shareholder, he is ultimately responsible, but leaders often mishandle certain situations. I would back and invest again and again in Mark Zuckerberg. I believe he should be the chairman and the CEO, but the company, to its own admission, has, I think, deeply mishandled the last 12 months.
So what needs to change then?
My advice is there just needs to be a radical change in terms of how decisions are made. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's Mark and Sheryl that are at fault. I think Mark and Sheryl are about the best team there is in the technology business. But with a lot of the departures, they need to rebuild, in many cases, much of the management team, and I think they're doing that.
Okay, let's take a quick look at founder-led companies in general, because it's not just Zuckerberg. It feels like founder-led companies in general are under fire. There's Snap's Evan Spiegel. Through your career, you've backed a lot of these companies, and I'm wondering, is it time to rethink the kind of structure, especially ahead of some of the big tech listings of next year?
I don't think it is time to change if one wants to achieve enormous upside. So if we think of the FANG and BAT stocks, most of the The great ones are founder-led still.
For a time.
For a time. And I believe if we look forward over the next 10 years, AI is the fundamental platform that will drive value, and 18 of the 20 most valuable companies 10 years from now in the world will be technology-oriented and will be in the US and China.
So if you had to choose one, and when we talk about FANGs and BATs, they've both seen pretty big sell-off in recent months and this year, what would you be choosing going into 2019? American tech, the FANGs, or the BATs? For our viewers, that's Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent.
I really like Alibaba and Amazon.
Okay.
And I think both of the companies stand to do extremely well. And Alibaba in particular has built the deepest management team in China.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for being with us today. Look forward to the rest of the conference, and we appreciate it.
Great to be in the Bay Area.
Back over to you guys.